The real estate agent's voice crackled with enthusiasm on the other end of the line. "Claire, I think I've found the one. Your dream home. But we need to move fast, there's already interest." My fingers tightened around the phone as my heart pounded. After what felt like an eternity of searching, endless house tours, and repeated disappointments, was this finally it? "When can you come see it, Danielle?" my agent asked. "I can leave work early today," I replied, already mentally rearranging my schedule. Teaching high school chemistry had at least given me the flexibility to make house hunting work. "Perfect. Meet me at 4 o'clock. Trust me, Claire, this place is special." As I ended the call, I let out a long breath, trying to steady the excitement bubbling inside me. At 32, I had spent years saving every extra penny, cutting back on luxuries while my friends splurged on vacations and designer handbags. Teaching wasn't exactly a path to wealth, but with careful budgeting and sheer determination, homeownership was finally within reach. The house was everything I had hoped for and more. Nestled at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, the craftsman-style home was full of charm without feeling outdated. The original hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and a kitchen that made my heart race all felt like they had been waiting just for me. But the backyard sealed the deal, a perfect space for the garden I had always dreamed of and a covered porch that I could already picture myself sitting on, grading papers while listening to the rain. "Well?" Danielle asked, though my expression must have said it all. "It's perfect," I murmured, already imagining my life unfolding within these walls. "What's the asking price?" The number she gave me made my stomach tighten. It was right at the upper edge of my budget, not impossible, but it would mean being extra careful with my spending for a while. Still, some things were worth the sacrifice. "I want to make an offer," I said with conviction. Danielle's face lit up. "I had a feeling you'd say that. Let's get started on the paperwork." That evening, I could hardly contain my excitement as I drove to my parents' house for our weekly dinner. I couldn't wait to tell them, hoping they'd share in my happiness. Maybe I was being too optimistic. The moment I stepped inside, I sensed something was off. My sister, Lauren, was there, a rare occurrence on a Wednesday night. The look in her eyes told me something was coming, and I probably wasn't going to like it. "Claire," my mom called from the kitchen. "You're just in time. Lauren has some exciting news." I forced a smile and hung up my coat. Lauren had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. While I had chosen the path of teaching, she had climbed the corporate ladder in finance, rising quickly through the ranks with her relentless ambition. Our parents never hid their admiration for her 6-figure salary and high-powered career. "What's the news?" I asked, though a sinking feeling had already settled in my gut. Lauren's smile was sharp, almost gleeful. "I'm buying a house. That gorgeous craftsman on Maple Street. Mom and Dad are helping with the down payment. Isn't that amazing?" The room seemed to tilt. My dream home, the one I had just toured, the one I was ready to make an offer on. How did she even know about it? That's the house I was going to buy," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I saw it today." Lauren's expression didn't change. "Oh, I know." My breath caught. "I drove by while you were there," she continued, her tone light, almost amused. "It's a little extravagant for a teacher's salary, don't you think? You should probably be looking at something a bit more practical." "Lauren," my father cut in, his voice carrying a hint of warning, though it lacked any real weight. He had never truly reprimanded her for anything. "What?" she shrugged, feigning innocence. "I'm just being realistic. Claire's a teacher. She doesn't need a house that size. I, on the other hand, will actually use it, hosting clients, holding events. It makes much more sense." I turned to my parents, searching their faces for any sign that they saw how unfair this was. But my mother only beamed at Lauren, and my father nodded approvingly, as if her business savvy was something to be proud of. "The money's already been transferred," Lauren said, twisting the knife even deeper. "I'm putting in my offer tonight, and it'll be well over asking. No one else will even come close." A wave of nausea rolled over me. Years of saving, planning, and dreaming, all wiped away in a matter of seconds because my sister had decided she wanted something that was mine. just like she always did. I need some air, I muttered, turning toward the door. I barely registered my mother calling after me about dinner getting cold. I couldn't stay another second. Stepping outside, I inhaled deeply, hoping the cool evening air would settle the storm brewing inside me. It didn't. My phone buzzed in my pocket, Danielle. She was probably checking if I was ready to submit my offer. An offer that now felt meaningless. But as I stood there, staring out into the dimming sky, something clicked. A detail Danielle had mentioned earlier about the house. Something that could change everything. I pulled out my phone and quickly dialed her number. Claire, I was just about to call you. Are you ready to? Danielle, I cut in, my voice steady even as my pulse raced. That house. It's in a historic district, right? Yes, it's part of the Oak Park Historic District. Why? A slow smile spread across my face as I recalled a crucial detail she'd shared. And any changes to the exterior have to be approved by the Preservation Board, correct? That's right, she confirmed. Anything from landscaping to windows, even paint colors, needs approval. The rules are pretty strict, some buyers find them frustrating. My smile widened. No changes at all. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Claire, what are you thinking? I glanced back at the house, my resolve hardening. I have an idea. Lauren was used to getting everything she wanted, effortlessly taking whatever she pleased, never bothering with the details. But this time, she'd been reckless. While I had spent hours learning about the neighborhood, falling in love with its charm and regulations, I knew for a fact that she had done none of that. She never worried about the fine print when she believed she had all the power. I walked back inside, where my family was already gathered around the dinner table. Lauren looked up, her expression smug, triumphant. Feel better, she asked, her tone syrupy sweet with just the right amount of condescension. I know it must be disappointing, but you'll find something more reasonable. I took my seat and casually spooned some mashed potatoes onto my plate. You know what? You're absolutely right. That house probably wasn't the best fit for me after all. I hope you love it. For just a fraction of a second, her smile flickered, her confidence wavering. She had expected anger. Maybe even tears, something she could use later to paint me as emotional and irrational. But I only smiled and asked my mother to pass the green beans. I let her believe she had one. I let her go ahead and put in her offer, spending our parents' money on that hefty down payment. Because I knew something she didn't. Something that would make her regret every dollar she had just spent. Lauren had always been good at taking what she wanted. But I had always been better at playing the long game. And this game was just beginning. The next day, when her offer was accepted, she couldn't contain herself. The texts and calls were relentless, each one dripping with false sympathy. I know you're upset, Claire, but maybe this will motivate you to aim higher. Teaching is sweet, but you can't expect to have the same things I do. I let her talk. I saved every message. I knew they'd come in handy later. 2 weeks later, she came storming into my classroom during lunch, her designer heels clicking furiously against the linoleum. Her face was flushed with frustration. You knew, she accused, slamming both hands onto my desk. Didn't you? I glanced up from the stack of tests I had been grading, perfectly calm. Knew what? The historic district rules, she snapped. I set my pen down and tilted my head. Of course. I always research neighborhoods thoroughly before considering a purchase. Don't you? Her jaw clenched. They won't let me change a thing. No new windows, no expanded driveway for extra parking, nothing. I can't even repaint without months of approval. I simply smiled. The long game had just paid off. That's how historic districts work, I said, casually marking another test. They're designed to protect the architectural character of the neighborhood. It's actually pretty fascinating. The Preservation Board has been enforcing these guidelines since. I don't care about the history, Lauren snapped, cutting me off as her voice edged higher. I had a vision for that house. It was going to be perfect for entertaining clients, modern, sleek, impressive. But now they're telling me that any exterior changes could take months to get approved, if they even allow them at all. I set my pen down and met her glare. That sounds frustrating. Almost as frustrating as watching someone snatch away the house you'd been dreaming of, just because they could. Her jaw tightened, fists clenching at her sides. You knew, she hissed. You let me buy it, knowing I'd hate these restrictions. I didn't let you do anything, I said, holding her gaze. You took what you wanted, like always. I just didn't stop you. A flicker of desperation crossed her face. You have to help me fix this. Talk to the preservation board. Explain my plans. You're good at dealing with all those bureaucrats and committees. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Why would I do that? You stole something I worked for, something I spent years saving for. And you did it just because you could. Because you think my job somehow makes me less deserving. Now you get to deal with the reality of what you bought. I crossed my arms. And Mom and Dad? They're going to be furious if this doesn't work out. After all, they poured a lot of money into this for you. Lauren's nostrils flared. Claire. Maybe, I interrupted, you should have done your homework before spending their money. Instead of assuming you could just bulldoze your way through any obstacle. I shrugged. The preservation board doesn't care about your job title or your connections. They care about protecting these homes. Her composure wavered, cracks forming in her usually unshakable confidence. This is petty, Claire. Really petty. No, I said quietly, letting the words sink in. Petty was taking something you didn't even want, just to prove you could. Petty was mocking my career and my dreams. This? I smiled. This is karma. She turned on her heel and stormed out, nearly colliding with a student who had just stepped into the classroom. I went back to grading, but I couldn't stop the satisfied smirk from creeping onto my face. Over the next few weeks, Lauren's frustration only grew. Every grand idea she had for the house was met with resistance. The preservation board refused her request to replace the original wooden windows with modern ones. Her plan to widen the driveway? Denied, it would disrupt the historic streetscape. Even something as small as changing the exterior color to a trendy gray was rejected. The house had to be painted in an approved palette, consistent with its historical period. Naturally, my parents took her side. Claire, my mother pleaded at yet another tense family dinner, can't you help your sister? She's put so much money into this house. She knew exactly what she was getting into, I said, calmly adding more salad to my plate. Or at least, she would have, if she'd bothered to do her research. This attitude isn't productive, my father muttered, irritation seeping into his voice. Lauren was just trying to make a smart investment. I scoffed. No. She was trying to take something from me, like she always has. And for once, it blew up in her face. The final straw came when the preservation board unanimously rejected her proposal for a modern glass addition. She had spent thousands on architects and designs, certain that her influence and connections would win them over. Instead, they gave her a firm lecture on preserving the historic integrity of the neighborhood. That evening, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. Name your price, she said the moment I opened the door. I arched an eyebrow. For what? For the house, she said impatiently. I know you still want it. Name your price, and it's yours. Leaning against the doorframe, I considered her for a moment. The original asking price, I said evenly. Not a penny more. Her eyes widened. That's ridiculous. I paid over asking, not to mention all the money I've wasted on designs, applications, and legal fees. I shrugged. Those were your choices. Bad ones, made without thinking ahead. I'm giving you a way out at the original price. Take it or leave it. She glared at me, but I could already see the truth settling in. The house had become a nightmare for her, a never-ending list of rules, restrictions, and bureaucratic red tape. Everything she hated. And I was offering her an escape. Her dream of wowing clients with a sleek, modern masterpiece had crumbled, and now, her so-called perfect little sister was her only escape. Fine, she snapped. But I want this handled quickly and quietly. No one needs to know about it. I smiled. Of course not. We wouldn't want the great Lauren Bennett to admit she made a mistake, would we? The sale was finalized with a quiet efficiency, just as she had demanded. The price? Exactly what I had originally budgeted, an outcome that brought me more satisfaction than I'd ever admit out loud. My parents were livid, of course, but there wasn't much they could do. Lauren had made her decisions, and now it was my turn to enjoy the rewards. Moving day felt almost surreal as I carried boxes through the front door, my front door. A grin tugged at my lips as I spotted the scattered rejection letters still sitting on the kitchen counter, remnants of Lauren's failed renovation plans. She hadn't even bothered to throw them away. The house needed work, but not in the way Lauren had imagined. Where she saw outdated walls that needed tearing down, I saw charm and history worth preserving. Where she had planned to install sleek, modern fixtures, I saw original craftsmanship that simply needed restoration. This home didn't need reinvention, it needed someone who would appreciate it for what it already was. That first weekend, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I cleaned, painted, using only historically approved colors, of course, and slowly made the space my own. The built-in bookshelves, once dismissed by Lauren as outdated clutter, were soon lined with my collection of classic novels and science texts. My grandmother's antique desk found its perfect home in the study. The kitchen, with its original cabinets that Lauren had planned to rip out, quickly became my favorite place to grade papers and plan lessons. And the backyard, the one I had envisioned since the moment I first saw it, began to take shape. I joined the neighborhood gardening club, learning from longtime residents which flowers thrived in the local climate. Far from being an obstacle, the preservation board became an unexpected source of support. They connected me with skilled craftsmen and shared invaluable advice on maintaining the home's historic integrity. My parents, predictably, saw things differently. "You're just doing this to get back at Lauren," my mother accused during one of her increasingly rare visits. I set a cup of tea in front of her, the sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows. "No," I said simply. "I'm doing this because I love this house and everything it represents." Lauren never did. But the biggest transformation wasn't in the house, it was in me. Somewhere in those first few months, the relentless need to prove myself, to compete with Lauren, started to fade. I had built something of my own, something that reflected who I was, not who I was trying to impress. Even my students noticed. "Ms. Bennett, you seem happier," Jake observed after class one afternoon. He was right. The house had become more than a home, it was a sanctuary. I hosted study groups in the dining room, helping students struggling with complex chemistry concepts. The backyard, once just a dream, became an outdoor classroom where I could teach environmental science through hands-on lessons. Lauren, meanwhile, had moved into a sleek, modern condo in the city's financial district. It was everything she had wanted the historic home to be: glass, chrome, and sharp angles. Polished. Expensive. A perfect backdrop for her high-powered image. She never visited my house, never acknowledged how spectacularly her plan to overshadow me had backfired. 1 year after moving in, I hosted a garden party for the neighborhood association. The same preservation board members who had shut down Lauren's grandiose plans now praised my dedication to the home's history. The garden was vibrant, the house's original features gleamed, and every corner reflected the love and care I had poured into it. As I stood on the porch, the same one where Lauren had once envisioned installing sleek steel railings, I watched my neighbors enjoying the space, their laughter floating through the summer air. For the first time in a long time, I felt a deep, undeniable sense of belonging. This house had tested us both, and in the end, it had revealed something important. I was the one who truly deserved it. My phone buzzed. A message from Lauren. "Mom says your little garden party is a success. Hope you're enjoying playing house in that museum." I couldn't help but smirk as I typed back, "I am." The house had found its rightful owner, someone who valued it for what it was, not for what it could have been forced to become. Lauren didn't reply, but her silence said everything. We both knew the truth. The best kind of revenge isn't about getting even, it's about staying true to yourself and realizing that's enough. Looking back, I understand now that Lauren's attempt to steal my dream home had never really been about the house itself. It was about control. About maintaining the unspoken hierarchy where her choices, her career, and her definition of success were superior to mine. But life has a funny way of restoring balance. The very rules that had frustrated her were the ones that protected my dream. Her need to prove she was better than me ended up being the reason I gained my independence. And as for the house? It became exactly what it was meant to be, a home where history and the future could exist in harmony. Just like its owner. Lauren still comes to family gatherings, though not as often. I see the flicker of irritation in her eyes whenever relatives compliment my restoration work or ask about my latest gardening project. But it doesn't bother me anymore. I've learned that the best way to handle people who try to diminish you is simple: thrive anyway. Grow, even in the spaces where they swore you never could. Recently, the Preservation Board invited me to join their committee. We need more people who truly appreciate the character of this neighborhood, they told me. I accepted, knowing that when Lauren eventually found out, she'd have a good laugh right before it annoyed her beyond belief. On quiet evenings, I sit on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the sky melt into hues that never would have passed Lauren's approval for her ultramodern redesign. And I reflect on how close I came to losing this place, how her arrogance and my patience had led, almost poetically, to the perfect outcome. This house is more than just a victory in a sibling rivalry. It's proof that the things we desire most don't always come through force or entitlement, but through understanding, respect, and knowing their true worth. Lauren may have her sleek condo with its glass walls, city views, and an address that screams success. But I have something far more valuable. A home that reflects who I am. A place where my dreams have taken root and flourished. And the quiet, deeply satisfying knowledge that, for once, doing things the right way was its own reward. As for my parents, they've started to come around, though they'll never fully admit that Lauren was wrong. And that's fine. I've learned that validation doesn't have to come from the people who never recognized your worth in the first place. Sometimes, it comes from proving them wrong just by being exactly who you were always meant to be. Lauren had made her decisions, and now it was my turn to enjoy the rewards. Moving day felt almost unreal as I carried boxes through the doorway, my doorway now. A small smile tugged at my lips as I spotted the stack of rejected permits still scattered across the kitchen counter. Reminders of Lauren's failed renovation attempts. She hadn't even bothered to clear them away. The house needed work, but not in the way she had imagined. Where Lauren had seen outdated walls begging to be demolished, I saw charm that deserved to be preserved. Where she had envisioned modern fixtures, I saw history waiting to be restored. This home didn't need reinvention, it needed someone to appreciate it for what it already was. That first weekend, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I scrubbed, repainted, using only historically approved colors, of course, and slowly made the space my own. The built-in bookshelves, which Lauren had dismissed as old-fashioned clutter, were soon lined with my collection of science texts and classic novels. My grandmother's antique desk found its perfect place in the study. The kitchen, with its original cabinets Lauren had been so eager to rip out, quickly became my favorite spot. It was where I graded papers, planned lessons, and sipped tea while gazing out at the backyard, the one I had dreamed of since the moment I first saw the house. The garden took shape gradually. I joined the local gardening club, learning from longtime residents about which flowers and plants flourished best in this area. The Preservation Board, which Lauren had viewed as nothing more than an obstacle, became an invaluable resource. They connected me with expert craftsmen who specialized in restoring historic homes, offering guidance on everything from landscaping to period-appropriate finishes. Unsurprisingly, my parents weren't thrilled. "You're only doing this to get back at your sister," my mother accused during one of her increasingly rare visits. I poured her tea and met her gaze calmly. "No," I said. "I'm doing this because I love this house and everything it represents." Lauren never did. But the biggest transformation wasn't just in the house, it was in me. In those first few months, something shifted. The need to constantly prove myself, to measure my success against Lauren's, began to fade. For the first time in my life, I had built something for myself, not to impress anyone, but simply because it reflected who I was. Even my students picked up on the change. "Ms. Bennett, you seem happier," Jake remarked after class one afternoon. And he was right. The house became more than just a place to live, it became a sanctuary. The dining room, once meant to host Lauren's corporate gatherings, became a space for study groups where I helped struggling students break down complex chemistry concepts. The backyard evolved into an outdoor classroom, a place where I could teach environmental science through hands-on lessons. Meanwhile, Lauren had settled into a sleek, ultra-modern condo in the heart of the city's financial district. It was everything she had wanted the historic house to be: glass walls, chrome fixtures, sharp angles. Stylish. Expensive. A statement. She never visited my home, never acknowledged how completely her attempt to overshadow me had failed. 1 year after moving in, I hosted a garden party for the neighborhood association. The same preservation board members who had rejected Lauren's plans without hesitation were now complimenting my thoughtful restoration of the home. The garden was thriving, the house's original details gleamed under the summer sun, and every inch of the space spoke to the love and care I had poured into it. I had wanted this house to be a home. And that's exactly what it had become.